The following program is brought to you by Element 14, the electronics community where you can connect and collaborate with top engineers from around the world. Join now at element14.com/presents.
So, I haven't built a computer in over 10 years, and I think it's about time that I make a cool case mod. It's something I've never done, and of course I'm going to make it into a robot. That's kind of my thing. And I'm not just going to be making any old robot, no. I'm going to be making a CL4P TP robot, but you might better know him as Claptrap. My name is DJ, you're watching Element 14 Presents, and let's get started.
Amazing hacks. Inspired designs. Each week, Element 14 Presents brings you innovative projects using electronics, engineering, and more.
By the way, just to satisfy all the legal mumbo-jumbo, I want to state that I have no relationship whatsoever with 2K Games, Gearbox Software, or any of their affiliates. This is purely a fan build, but I hope someone from there gets to see this, and I hope they like it. Anyway, that's enough of that. Let's talk about the goals and objectives of my project. So first things first, let's take a look at Claptrap's design and see how that will inform my own design in real life. Right off the bat, we can tell that Claptrap is a fairly simple looking robot. He's this sort of tapered trapezoidal prism shape. He's got a monowheel for a base. He's got two little spindly arms with some flappy flap hands, which would be terrible robot hands in real life, but it doesn't matter, they're funny. And he's also got this monocular blue eye. Now, I also need him to hold a full-size ATX motherboard, so he'll be a pretty good size. Not quite life size, as if he were a real character, but pretty darn close. So let's talk about Claptrap's 3D design and how I'm going to make him work in the real world. Now, you might be thinking, well, he's a video game character. Can't you just use his 3D model from one of the video games? Yes, but mostly no, and here's why. So let's take a look at this mesh I found of Claptrap from Borderlands 2. Now, this will be useful for figuring out his proportions, but other than that, it's kind of useless. It's one gigantic hunk of polygons, and that's totally fine for a digital asset, but I need to make him out of atoms, which means I'm going to be breaking down his various components into pieces that I can easily cut out of real materials, or machine them, or 3D print them. And if I want him to actually work, all of the parts need to function in the real world. Like most video game characters, Claptrap doesn't have to obey the laws of physics in the video game, which means that his character model does some things that don't work in the real world. His eye just clips through his body, his joints don't have any real visible fasteners, and his overall chassis is sort of homogeneous, which means it's not going to be very easy to access. And I need to make him work in the real world, which means all of his joints need to actually be attached somehow. He can't just have floating bits, and he certainly can't clip through himself in the real world in order to function. So I will need to compromise on his design in order for him to be a real thing. And here he is. This is my 3D model of Claptrap, which of course is in Fusion 360, my favorite piece of 3D modeling software. So I've focused on the most challenging aspects of his 3D design, namely his arm and hand, which actually has about 25 individual pieces so far, and his eye assembly, which I'll talk a little bit more once we go through the physical parts that make him up, but you can see that his eye pivots on a core ball joint, and that there are two perpendicular ball joints that are attached to servos. So this will allow his eye to pivot along two independent axes. Now I've got everything into individual pieces that are a combination of 3D printable parts and machined parts. So things like these grills will actually be machined out of aluminum, whereas things that are a bit more tedious, like this grill, which has some funny louvers? I don't know what you call these. And these other shapes will just be 3D printed. Same thing with his ear flaps and his arm assembly. Now you notice I didn't model the wires because I don't need to model the wires, but I did leave the holes for the wires so that I can attach them in real life. Same thing with the tire. So the tire is individual segments. I did originally print and model the more complex tire that he has in the pre-sequel, but I goofed up on the design somewhere and it printed terribly, and the design was kind of wasteful, so I went back and went with a simpler tire design, and this is actually the tread pattern that he has in Borderlands 3. Same thing with this little lower plate below his disk drive. This, whatever it is, has always been broken ever since Borderlands 1. I don't know, maybe it was some sort of little display. I like to think that it might have been like a little audio spectrum analyzer or something for his voice at one point in time. But even on working Claptrap units, we don't know what this actually does, so it's kind of useless. I don't want just a broken thing. So for now, it is a grill, which it's just a plain grill in Borderlands 3. And of course, I've got his little warning disk drive plate, which I did make out of acrylic, and I just engraved this. Don't worry, I'll paint it more accurately later. Now, there will technically be enough room to have this extend out. I don't need an actual disk drive though. It's nearly 2020 and I haven't touched a DVD in quite a few years. So I don't think I'll use an actual disk drive, but I do have a drawer slide, so I might add that if there's enough time later. Other than that, we've just got this lower grill right here, which I'm pretty sure is where I will keep the main speaker for his voice. But other than that, this will be the main exhaust port for some computer fans, and I will have intake right here along the base. Is that gonna be enough airflow? Who knows? I don't know, I'm not an actual PC designer. So I've also got his antenna here, which will actually be a hollow tube, so it glows. There's just a point light source in real life, which unfortunately we can't do, but I can stick an LED in the tip, which is what I'm actually going to do, so he's at least a little bit glowy there. And his eye also does have a single spot for an LED right there. And I have already gone ahead and machined his eyepiece out of a 1/4 inch thick blue acrylic. Now, in order to make it a bit more teal like it is in the game, I'm going to add some lighting gel. So I just marked and measured those, and I'll stick them behind the main piece of acrylic and wedge them together. Compress them together with an extra piece of polycarbonate, another little disc that I had, so that he's much more accurate to the color in the game. Now, I still need to add the internal structure, but that is a much more simple task compared to all of the other details. Now, I do need to add a base as well, because this isn't going to stand on itself. So I will have something probably that just has 2 spars that come across, so I can just gently place him on the base. But I might also screw him down so he's nice and firm. And yeah, let's get to that. Let's get to the actual physical parts in the real world. So as you can see, there are quite a few pieces that go into this design. This is probably about 160 hours worth of 3D printing and machining time, and this is still only about 80% of the things I need to realize this build. I've got a lot of work to do. And if you guys have any modest suggestions as to things you'd like to see me incorporate into this build, let us know at the Element 14 community at element14.com/presents. And I'll see you guys in a few days. Whew.